So when it comes to somebody's choices and what they call sin, I don't see, I don't understand, I don't get. It's not that's not my deal. My problem really is right at the point of how much science we have versus who do we insist should transition. Like in Europe, they have laws in which if children identify as trans and they diagnose them, then at 6, 7, 8 years old, they can start um, a hormonal treatment which will prevent puberty. Okay,
Oh, by the way, I think it wasn't streaming that entire time. I hate this. Anyway,
that's
but
funny.
yeah, don't worry about it. Uh, just continue the conversation.
That's fine. The point is, if I can teach you something, if you can teach me something, we've still won
Okay.
in that sense.
And we can learn
Um,
that I am a absolute boomer who doesn't know how to do things.
that's fine. Did you save? Did you? Are you still streaming like locally to file?
No, it was supposed to be streaming to YouTube the entire time, but I don't know. Maybe I can fix it in post.
Mm,
Oh, don't worry about it. Just continue.
no, no worries. And I'm out. Um, but yeah, the science is so new on it that it may be the case, but to have a child who hasn't even uh, gone through puberty, to assume that gender identity is something that happens before puberty to an extent that could be diagnosed,
It is.
it
No, I'm
is
not assuming it is. We develop gender. One, we develop, in the brain by the time we're like
well,
what, 18 months. There's
it's
gender separations.
yes, no, 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 it is. But what I'm saying is, as far as it being right now a diagnosable thing worthy of changing a child's entire life,
Yes.
right? The same, right?
Yes, to
Well,
improve it, right?
if it's the case, what?
To improve it.
I Well, I understand that's the intention to improve it, but you see, there's a problem when you say, as in one case, that not all men share the same brain traits, not all women share the brain traits, but say that it is absolutely diagnosable that trans can be diagnosed at a young age like that. There's a problem with that conflicts that thought process, and they do that. You see what I'm saying?
Can you just repeat that one more time for me? I'm sorry.
Okay. Do all men have the same brain composition type and etc.?
No.
No, right. There's on averages and cis averages, etc. Now, not all women the same way. Now, if not all women have the same and not all men have the same, how can you assume that trans presents in the same way?
They don't. That's
Exactly. So
that's
how
why
can you
you
diagnose it
that's why
in
you
children?
listen to the children.
Right, but if you stop puberty in children, things will not develop because there's other triggers besides the hormones that they introduce.
But they can
For
still be
example,
favorable, right?
what?
They can still be favorable, right? They might not be the same, but they
Uh,
can still be favorable. And unless you have,
well,
go
they will
ahead.
fail to grow their body correctly.
Correctly is prescriptive.
No, 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 no. I mean, if you pause puberty, then later on, when you decide to resume it in either direction, no matter what, they will not grow incorrectly. Like you'll not be able to have you'll have basically a child's penis, for example. That is what you'll be stuck with for the rest of your life, and you will not be able to transition with that because there's not enough junk to make female junk, for
Yes,
example.
yeah, there is. I know there's a famous case of someone who did start puberty blockers, and it was a more difficult surgery. But as medicine advances further and further, they ended up having a successful sexual transition surgery or sexual confirmation surgery. So as medical, advances keep happening, of course we're going to find people who can perform surgeries even on people who are a more difficult case in which they went through puberty suppression.
Right, but there's other genes that are associated with puberty other than the ones that we understand right now when it comes to um, there's more hormones and genetics involved in puberty than what we understand right now.
Yeah,
Okay?
probably. Yeah, that's going to always be the case forever, right?
So yeah, well, perhaps, but the point is being able to reach a point in which you're able, okay, let's take it another way because this is I think is more applicable. Can children make long-term decisions?
Um, yeah.
Okay, that is a process of higher brain functions, neocortex, cerebral cortex. Okay, that is the concept of theoretical perception of the future, being able to take decisions that you've made
And that's not
and
fully
predicting the
developed until
future.
about age 25 for most people, right?
Exactly. After neurosynaptic trimming, pruning, whatever. And so being able to ask a child uh, about themselves as far as perception, it's not even developed until they get those higher brain functions, which are responsible for social behavior, which start developing when they're a teenager.
Does that mean we
And then,
shouldn't? Does that mean we shouldn't listen to cisgender kids as well? Like they're not old enough to know that they're a boy or a girl. So let's just apply that across the board, right? They're not. They don't
well,
know.
one of those decisions involves active, intervention. The other one does not.
It could sometimes, if it's really really severe, and if the an immense team of medical professionals. So a multi
Mhm.
so I have a study pulled up right now called "Young Adult Psychological Outcome After Puberty Suppression and Gender Reassignment," and the conclusions say that a clinical protocol of a multidisciplinary team with mental health professionals, physicians, and surgeons, including puberty suppression followed by cross-sex hormones and gender reassignment surgery, provides provides gender dysphoric youth who seek gender reassignment from early puberty on the opportunity to develop into well-functioning adults. I did my best Ben Shapiro impression there. Okay, I read as fast as possible. Um,
I get that, but okay.
so
All
it's
right.
it's it's
Well,
not.
children should not. Okay. Let me see. All right. Play from this. Let's see. Okay.
This isn't something that people go into haphazardly. Like most kids, well, I don't know what the actual percentages are, but a lot of kids just socially transition. They don't
Right.
actually go under puberty suppression unless they want to, and unless the a team of medical professionals say that that's the right way to go. This isn't something applied haphazardly because, of course, I don't know where this belief that politics at the time are influencing what physicians are doing to their
Well,
patients.
politics are influencing it because um, there is a section of, I guess the only way to put them is, I hate to use the word feminist because I thought I was a feminist until third wave hit the fucking internet. Um, but in any case, there's a section of intersectional feminists that have a lot put into brains being universally correct, or not correct. What's what I'm looking for? More similar than dissimilar to a degree, which could be considered absurd. But it's because of that there's been this pressure in the psychology community in order to diagnose these things as true,
Do you think that
things
that's
like
a
that.
bad thing? Like there was an equivalent suppression of homosexuality as like in the past in the 70s. Like there was
Well,
equivalent.
homosexuality is leaps and bounds different in that you can be gay without changing your body, medically speaking.
Not in the sense that it wasn't pressured politically in
Well,
to
yes,
change it from a
I
mental
will admit,
illness.
I'm granting you that, but what I'm saying, that's really where the line is. It's about the permanent change that is being introduced to children. I won't even say pushed, I'll say introduced to them. Because if they change their mind, they're screwed. And
Okay,
there is cases in which they have changed their mind.
yeah, cases, but that's why you have to have a multidisciplinary team to make sure that this is what is the right course of action, right?
Yes, but we don't understand it enough in order to be able to do that. We don't even understand identity very well.
We understand that supporting children in their gender identity makes them way more psychologically well adjusted. Like
We do
we know
not
that
know
for a
that.
fact. We know that for a fact. So let's see. Hold on. I have a. Please tell me I have a study pulled up here. So I had a lot of studies pulled up that said that children who are supported in their gender identity are way more well adjusted. They're way more they're close. They're comparable to cisgender peers in almost everything, except with slightly elevated anxiety if they are supported in their transitioning.
When did these studies start?
Uh, Fairly recently, isn't that a good thing?
No, it's not a good thing because you don't know about the long term effects on it.
Well, we can't have the long term effects on studies that were conducted in 1980. Like those are
Right.
terrible because the attitudes at the time were enormously different. We can't compare
Sure.
studies in 1980 to that today. Like in 1980, I think 1984, more than half of Americans thought that homosexuality should be illegal. So of course, social
Right.
acceptability wasn't going to be a measurable effect there.
Well, it's not even the case where I think it should be illegal. What I think is it should not be on children for the time being.
Even if the
I think
research says that it helps.
no, I don't. It does not make sense because you don't even have all the aspects of the brain developed when they're that young. You don't know how their whole behavior is going to be later on. It could be it could be a presentation of imitation. There's children who actually present with identity disorders when they're young,
Yeah.
uh, but not gender identity disorders. But it makes sense in the context. Like one kid I remember who thought he was a robot. All right,
Hmm.
he pretended to be a robot, and everywhere he went, he was a robot, and he thought he was like Data from Star Trek.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so that's an example of an identity disorder, but that's born out of the pattern is very, very easy to understand. It's he did not want to be who he was, and so he's pretending to be somebody else. So how do you know the difference? I'm not even saying that that is the case in all of transgenders. What I am saying is how do you diagnose the difference between somebody who wants to be something else because it's not who they are, that is either a robot or a woman
You said
or a
earlier that
boy?
homosexuality is very different than gender
It is,
identity,
yes.
and yes, and you're correct in that. But now you're trying to
Mhm.
compare being a robot, a kid who says that they are a robot. You're trying to compare that to something analogous to being transgender.
No, what I'm saying is that the presentation of identity disorders is similar to gender dysphoria.
Do you have any
It,
evidence whatsoever to back that up?
uh, I could pull up the DSM, the diagnostic criteria.
Oh, come on now, an error occurred.
Uh,
Hold on, let's see if I can find full text available.
okay, so
Of course, an error occurred in the study that I had pulled up.
I can do some update. Alright.
So I know that every study that I've come across say that children who are supported in their gender identities have way better mental health outcomes. And you know what? That
Um,
includes the freedom to change, by the way.
that's what I'm arguing is that they don't have the freedom to
They
change. That's
do.
my problem.
Holy, yeah, they do.
Okay. Why do you think that?
Because we develop gender by the time we're about, between 18 months and 3 years old.
Uh,
And if a team, if you are doing what you should be doing as a parent and having regular checkups and going to a medical professional that is going to be as understanding as possible, they're going to say, hey, support your kid in their gender identity. That's what the Mayo Clinic says to do.
okay, what
So
does it mean to be male?
it's really, really complicated and it
Right.
changes very frequently.
Okay. So then this really, really complicated definition is going to happen between 11 months and 3 years.
Yes?
Okay, why not traits and not just a full identity?
Because this kid is going to have their own identity. They're going to have their own perception of what it means to be male or female, and they're going to identify
Okay.
with the one that they identify the closest with.
So they've discovered this by 11 months,
Maybe not all of that, and it depends on the kid.
right?
But by the time they're able to express themselves, it might be 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. And if they say that, hey, I really don't like being called a boy, and I would prefer to be called a girl, you should support them in that. That's what the Mayo Clinic says. That's
Right.
what all the major psychological associations says. That doesn't mean that you should just go ham and start doing everything they say. But that does mean you should listen to your kid, because gender
Mm,
is different than just playing.
mm. Well, technically, technically it's not. Do you know what
What?
play is?
Whoa! Yes, it is way different. Like,
What is play?
whoa! Play is pretending to be something that you're not. Identi-
Okay.
Identity is something that is in your brain. It's way
Calm down
different.
there. Calm down there because you're assuming a point that I'm making that I'm not making.
Okay, I apologize.
So
Go ahead and what is your point?
play is a social technology. It is among our earliest inventions and behaviors. So, for example, dolls is an example of play. What is it a play of? It is a play of gender identity in the sexual sense, reproductive wise, taking care of babies.
Sometimes, but
Oh,
both
okay.
sexes do that, right?
Uh, they can sometimes, but
Yes,
it's
they
not.
can.
It's not a prevalent.
Prevalent. It
It's
doesn't have
about
to be prevalent for it to
it's
exist.
about it's about basically the concept of taking care of something right here in front of you, like the child, the baby, the doll, whatever. Okay, it's sort of internalized. It's about emotional reciprocation. There's a whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
What we're talking about is, as far as play, um, boys will pretend to be firemen, play cops and robbers, shit like that. Girls will play house.
Sometimes.
They'll also, yes, they'll get more complicated. It's not just stereotypes like that, but I'm using stereotypes in order to make the point of put play as in gender identity in that. But also, how, Jesus, this is hard to explain. Um, Play would be, actually, there it is. Play would be a good example of finding out how the child identifies, because that is what they would gravitate to.
Mm-hmm.
It,
And that
it's
is a
the
factor.
what?
And that is a factor. Yeah.
Yeah, but when do you identify that?
It's. I'm not going to pretend to be a medical professional. What I'm saying is, I trust medical opinions and medical
Right,
consensus.
right. Well, we some of those traits develop at 11 months, and that is things like facial recognition is a big one. Um, um,
Yeah.
uh, Female faces versus male faces, attractive versus unattractive things. These are the studies. Also, very cool. Have you ever heard of the still face experiment?
No.
Still face experiment, very fascinating thing they did. Also, kind of scary to actually watch. The mother of a baby, they're in a room basically, and the study is she will stop making facial expressions for 3 minutes, and the child will start freaking out after 1 minute, like freaking out because it's unable to elicit an emotional reaction from his mother, or her mother.
Yeah.
Okay, so that shows the kind of development in the brain that is our ability to recognize expression. It happens that young, and that is critical development in our emotions. So that is critical development of emotions. That is why when you have the case of abused children, okay, abused children will sort of, how can I say this? I want to say accidentally, but that's not the word. But let's just say accidentally become gravitating towards or addicted to negative behaviors in order to elicit some kind. Let's say the only attention you got from your parent was her hitting you whenever she got mad at you, but never affection when she was happy with you. Then the only attention you ever got was negative, ergo, you would condition down the path of negative behavior during critical development. So that explains to you how critical development deals with our emotions, how we learn our emotions during that period. After that period, we begin to have more development in higher functions such as social comprehension, theory of mind, shit like that. So the ability to understand the group around you, what the group is doing, how the group perceive you, how you will present yourself to the group in order to get the type of attention that you want. Do you want to be looked at as a girl, as a boy, etc.? Do you want to be looked at as the top dog, so to speak, or do you want to be ignored? Things like this is part of social conditioning that you learn things from, right? That this is all about brain development. The brain develops, and then by
Is
the
this
time it
all?
gets to
Is
that
this
age,
all leading you to say that people become feminine because girls get more attention than boys?
I actually don't think that's the case. I think it is more the case that when it comes to the structure of female brains, there's more interconnectivity, and so there's more attention. There's more. Okay,
Well, we've already established that some parts of the of a trans woman's brain is going to be very similar to that of cisgender women, right?
closer to, but not. Okay, females, born females have about something like 10 times more white matter than males. 10 times. I think it might actually be 16 times.
On average,
But let's say 10. That is a remarkable quotient, though. That
sure.
is that is tenfold. That is 1,000%. Okay. Now, men have maybe 300, 400% more gray matter. The function of these is important because white matter allows you to encode memories faster. Memories including development, including perception of surroundings.
That's great. Can you see any evidence to say that people transition for attention? Because that's the interesting question to me here.
Uh, I I don't think that's the right way to put it.
Yeah, so when people say that they are a certain way, isn't it better just to take someone at their word and believe them?
I think it might be closer to observing other people and how they acquire more attention, and they perceive that as closer to something they want to be, and then it accidentally becomes an identity thing.
Okay, if it accidentally becomes an identity because they wanted to be, that's still their identity, and we should support them, right?
Well, I would generally say yes, but really my cutoff is children.
You're kind of okay. So, do you think that the medical professionals who are saying that, so for example, let's see, where is the Mayo Clinic? So when they say if your child is persistent about gender identity feelings, listen. Talk to your child and ask questions without judgment. To support your child, don't assume your child's gender expression is a form of rebellion or defiance. And I won't read you all of these. They're up on stream for anybody who wants to read them. I mean, I can if you
And
want
it never
to.
really makes sense. I can imagine. I can imagine a parent who discovers their child dressing up in girls' clothes or boys' clothes, whatever, and thinking that was an act of defiance. That's just weird to me. Oh, look, I'm wearing a dress. I wore a dress when I was 7. I remember that, and I just can't. I can't see that. Why would somebody say that?
Okay,
That's weird.
how about blaming your child for experiencing discrimination? Can you picture that?
What is he doing? Like, you know, what I mean, dressing up as a girl and going to school, that kind of thing.
If a trans girl goes to school in a dress, but people knew them as a boy 3 months beforehand, and they start experiencing discrimination,
That is
is that
actually an interesting
attention?
thing.
Is that attention seeking behavior?
No, no, no. I don't think so. No, but I do think I that's like antithetical to like normal human. Like, for example, if a girl, stereotypical cisgendered young girl, goes to school and she does anything at all that the kids make fun of, she will stop doing that thing. That's the same thing with boys as well. If he wears a stupid shirt or something, whatever, they're all going to make fun of him. He'll never wear that shirt again. But that's all kids. That's almost all people. That's shame. That's how they work around that.
Yes, but when you're
So
making fun of someone for a persistent identity, they can have immense psychological distress, like that can cause immense psychological dysfunction.
yeah, but it would be weird for them to even continue that behavior. I would bet good money that if you were to have a school environment in which I don't know, a trans identity was compulsory in the sense that that was the trend. All the boys are wearing dresses, or for some reason. This is an example. And then the kid goes to school and he's wearing pants, and then like, haha, you're wearing pants. That's so last year or something, whatever the fuck you want to put it.
Yeah.
Then that kid is going to be wearing a dress the next day. I guarantee it, because that is how social development works. That is how social pressure works. That is socialization. Somebody socialized to do that.
You kind of are making my point for me. If most boys wear pants and jeans and t-shirts to school, but one boy like who is born assigned male at birth like says that actually I really don't like doing this. I like to wear dresses and I like to be called she, and it does that. They're going against the grain. They're going against what you just said. Shouldn't that be a sign
Well,
that their identity is ingrained and that we should support them in it?
and I feel like I agree with you in a large part of that. The thing is, when did this kid understand the concept of being called one gender or the other? Did
Very
somebody
early.
teach them that?
Very early. Like it was
Saying,
to a certain extent it was taught, and to a certain extent it was biological. We don't know the differences between them. We don't know how much
you,
of one is.
right, but if you teach that, then that sort of screws it up because it's kind of like coaching. Like if you present the idea to them, and then they suddenly say, "Yeah, I feel like a girl," then where did it come from? It's like a chicken and the egg. Same thing. Was it because they taught it, or because they realized it when they were taught it?
Well,
Oh yeah, I
you teach
felt
your
like that.
kids things whether or not you try to teach them, right? Like you teach your kids behaviors and norms and social norms whether or not you mean to. They pick that up from
Right.
you regardless of that. And yeah, you might intend to teach them a lot of stuff, but if you say that, hey, actually, you can be either gender that you want to be, it's all a matter of which one that you identify with the most. And then they pick the one they weren't assigned at birth. Doesn't that kind of point to the fact that gender is a social construct? Like, why would you be worried about someone picking something other than their biological gender if gender and sex are the same thing and there's no neurological
Well,
basis for gender being different?
that's simply because it's a matter of defining what the gender is. And as you said before, it is extremely complicated, and there is no definitive way to define the gender uh, as like a thing because it is so abstract. So when you have a kid that says, "I feel like a girl," what does that mean? Does that mean, oh, well, I feel like a girl because I feel like I should have, boobs, or I feel like I should have long hair, or I feel like I should play with dollies? Well, then why can't a boy play with dollies?
They can.
You know, exactly. That's my point.
Yeah,
Then
that's
what
why
is gender?
it's more complicated than that. It's about identity.
Right.
So
I
we
agree
asked.
with you.
So it's hard to define it. It's hard to put it into words, but that's why we let the kid
So then
tell us what they
how the
are.
fuck does a kid know?
A kid knows because they know. I
They
know that's a
know?
tautology, but like, can you define gender for me?
No.
Yeah, I can't either. But we know. But I'm definitely a male. I'm definitely a man
Right.
because
Well, you're definitely
identify
a man,
as
yeah.
one. Yeah, but
But how does a kid
I
know?
can't define that the same way I know. They just do.
They okay. No. No,
There are
no.
a lot of
No.
complex processes in
Because
the brain
in this case, okay,
that interact with
how here,
society.
put it this way. Here, I got a thought experiment that will actually solve this. How would you diagnose the difference between a child that, let's say, a hypothetical child that is pretending to be a girl for attention, and a hypothetical child that is not pretending to be a girl for attention, and they're transgender? How would you tell the difference between the two?
I'm not a medical professional.
Okay, nobody can.
Whoa, there are medical professionals who are trained in this kind of stuff.
Right? They're trained in the science that we have, which we do not have much of.
We have enough. Well, we have to make do with what we have, right? And the science says that supporting someone in their gender identity improves mental outcomes. Every study that
Right.
I've met, that I've read and pulled up says that.
Right.
I'm very
Sure.
confident saying that's the scientific consensus.
Sure. Sure. But when should they be taken permanently physically serious? At what age?
Okay, tell you what, if they, well, first of all, you wouldn't need to do that until puberty, right?
At least puberty.
At
Sure.
least puberty. So if someone's been transgender since they were 4 years old, and they
Sure.
stay transgender until they're 11, I think it's pretty safe to say that that is their identity. And then
No, it's not safe to say that because they're only 11.
they're
Would you
only.
trust? Would you trust an 11-year-old to sign a contract?
All right, this is way different
What was why? Why is it different?
because this is about their identity, and we have studies saying that otherwise.
Okay. Well, I'm saying that those studies are inconclusive. And you should be saying the same thing because if gender identity is as fluid as it needs to be, then at the very least you can say that children have not developed to a significant okay, identity as a
Can we
female is different.
can we give kids any medication or any hormones, or are
I
these
would
special in
not.
some way?
I would not.
No, so you wouldn't give a kid insulin?
Oh, insulin, yeah, of course insulin.
But that's a hormone.
But it's not a permanently changing hormone. It's like if I no,
Changes you pretty good. It keeps you from dying. It's a big change.
sure. We're talking about halting puberty, which is a
Yes.
permanent physical identity as well as biological thingy. Right?
I
Do
get.
you,
Why
or
do you?
you think
Yes.
that
Why do you
there's a-
think? Why do you think that all the major psychological associations have bent the knee and say that this is the way to go for some kids who are very persistently trans?
I think it's because it was sort of a cascade. I mean, look at what's happening right now. If I was somebody who said outright, no, trans are all faking it, we need to put them in a psych ward, that would make you feel hostile, wouldn't it?
Oh, definitely.
Exactly. Now, who in their right mind with a full career would disagree?
I would hope no one in the same way.
Exactly.
So I'm really having trouble here. That's a bad thing. That people who say that trans people are mentally ill and should be locked up in a psych ward. It's bad that they
That's
can't.
not okay, that's not no, you're missing my point. My point is nobody can disagree with the concept without being,
Sure, they can.
you know,
People do it
okay.
all the time. Jordan Peterson does. Gatsat does.
Right, but Jordan Peterson is independent. He doesn't work at a hospital or anything. Now, there's a psychiatrist that worked at the Cleveland Clinic who was fired because he said, no, I don't think trans are this. I think that they're actually this and we need to help them, blah, blah, blah. He got fired after 25, 30 years.
And
That's a big deal, dude.
it's a big deal, but he could have been wrong too. Like people get
He
fired after
could
a long time. Like,
he could have
does he
been
have
wrong.
evidence? Did he have evidence, or was
You're
it
missing.
ideologically driven?
Okay, you're
Like you're
already
missing.
proving to me.
No, you're proving to me that you only see ideology coming from one side instead of the other. People, a lot of people who think that trans people shouldn't be able to transition or that that's a mistake, they have their own ideology that they're pushing. Why aren't you worried about that as well? Why can't we just look at the empirical evidence?
Well, that's kind of where I'm going with that.
I'm very much in favor of the empirical evidence, and the empirical evidence say that transitioning is the best way to go about things for most people on a broad
Okay,
scale.
what? Okay, how long do we improve? Okay, these studies have started fairly recently. Even when they began in the 80s, they are nowhere near the depth that they achieved when they started in like 2010, I think, is when that next wave of studies, maybe actually 2007, I remember because it was just before Obama. Um, okay, so this is not long enough to be able to assess somebody's long-term well-being. Now, I'm not even saying that trans cannot transition. I'm just saying that children should not be given hormones to pause their development.
Even if it
That's really,
improves outcomes.
I
Even if it
don't,
improves their mental outcomes, and if we take people who have been trans for a while in adulthood, and they say that they were consistently trans since they were X years old, and their
that
puberty
would be
suppressant would have
assuming.
made that. No, that would be listening. That's what that
No,
would
no, no,
be.
no, no, no. You're misunderstanding me. That would be assuming that two people are exactly alike. You see what I'm
No,
saying?
that's why we get a broad sample. That's
Right,
what.
but you get a broad sample, but then you still don't have a sample for every single person on the planet in every single life that they could possibly lead.
All right, so I guess no scientific study is good because we don't measure every single person on the planet. Like, no, of course
No,
we have
no,
we have representative samples.
we okay. Um, all right. No, we have samples. I believe what the fuck somebody. Ow. Oh, sorry, I get a message. Um, it's about the brain development specifically in children that is really the key here because brains are not fully developed. Okay, that's really it. It's because they're not developed, then they see things. The kids see the world differently than we do
Yeah.
when we're adults, and they don't before puberty. They don't see the world in sex unless somebody teaches them that, which is always usually well, not always. It's usually abuse. Put it that way, and so they don't have the full concept of what it means to be one gender or the other because gender does depend on interaction with society, which does include peer-to-peer relationships, which does include romantic relationships.
So does that apply to cisgender kids? They don't know what gender they are. They're not old enough to make that decision. So
Right.
why should we just make everybody wear the same, gray tunic? Why do we allow boys and girls to differentiate themselves
Well,
at an
that
early age if they don't know?
I am actually for something down that line of thought. But what I'm saying is, when it comes to biology, let it be until they're old enough. That's it. That's like my core point, because I know that the brains aren't developed. There's no way to perceive the world in the gender in its whole context. There are traits. It's like when you diagnose something with a DSM, you've got certain criteria that you go by, and if you match 5 out of 10 of the criteria, that is not conclusive to diagnose. You say somebody has traits of it. So basically, people have gender traits when they're babies until into their being toddlers and into their preteens and into their teenage years and until they're adults, and then they have gender traits, and then they may lack some gender traits, but they only have certain traits until they have the whole perspective from their biology and interaction. You see what I'm saying? Even if you
Yes,
don't agree, do you see what I'm saying? Okay.
I think I see what you're saying, but I'm still
Okay.
having trouble saying like why can't we, if the research says so, why is giving hormones to kids bad? We do that all the time. Like people with acromegaly and people with growth hormone disorders, we give them hormones to suppress those all the time.
Because we don't understand enough of the brain. Neurology is a very young science, and psychology is really only 80, maybe 100 years old. Technically, sort of with Freud, there was some concepts for the alienness, etc. But psychology is a super young science. Newton invented physics in what was it, 1700s, the 1600s.
So how would we ever find out if puberty suppression is the way to go if we're not allowed to do it?
That is a good question, and I think there's only one fair answer. There's only one fair answer, in my opinion, and that is to allow it to be voluntary according to the parents and with careful consideration, including. For example, what I'm saying not to do is to not force parents to give their kids hormones.
I'm pretty sure it's always voluntary, right?
No, it's not always voluntary. There are rules all across Europe in order the forcing transition. Well, no, forcing the pausing of puberty because somebody at school diagnosed them. Okay.
Do you think it's that simple? Like one person at school diagnosed them, and then
Um,
therefore they have to go
it
into
it
puberty suppression.
it may be more complicated than that, but that's not what I'm saying. Is specifically that somebody, one or 10 people diagnosed. The point is the parents. The only fair way to go about this is to respect sovereignty of parents, to the extent of
Is
whether
that what should take precedence? The well-being of the parents as opposed to the well-being of the child.
that's the only way to go about it. I mean, if you the only alternative is to have the raising of children being a collective responsibility, which is a very bad thing.
Really?
It is, yes.
What if you are an enormously transphobic couple? Now you
Okay.
say that me and my wife, we were enormously transphobic. Now, we don't get to decide what our kid is. We might have a transgender kid, and they start to act, or we might not even be enormously transphobic. We might not even care. We're just very strict about gender norms being enforced on our kid. And so that when they start,
Okay.
so we have a little girl, but she starts wanting to play with boy stuff. She starts wanting
Okay.
to dress in pants. She starts wanting to play baseball. She starts being rambunctious, and we hate that. We try to dress her up in dresses. We try to make her play with dolls, and she hates that.
Okay.
And she keeps telling us, "No, I want to be a boy. I want to be a boy. Like I feel way more comfortable in these clothes. I feel way more comfortable acting like this. I feel way more comfortable when you call me by these pronouns."
Okay.
And it's to the point where we are causing enormous stress to this child.
Hmm. Well,
Shouldn't someone step in at that point? If this child is enormously distressed because we will not let them express themselves in the way that they want?
I mean that's I understand where you're getting with that, and again, I agree with half of that in the sense that yeah, it may be stressing for the child, but the thing is the consistency of it, uh, and how to put this, it won't. Okay, how do you tell the difference between a transphobic couple and a not transphobic couple?
I would leave it to the
And
people who know more than me.
well, what I'm trying to say is like qualifying it in a legal context is very important because a legal context is a logical context. It's something you can quantify, you can measure, and you can make law of it. Now, if you make
I would push back just a little bit on that. No, we qualify things legally. We don't quantify.
no, you quantify the things that are qualified. You count the things that are measured against what is written as a law. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Okay, so,
Yeah, I
so it's
guess
like it's what you can, you know, measure and see and then make a law about. But in the case of the new science, you can't do very much about it. So it's going to fall on this sort of tipping point. And the only fair way that I can see is you educate the parents about potential behaviors, and then they can decide if they want their child to be that. That's really the only way to go about it. That's how I see it.
Do you think that parents should be able to deny their kids vaccinations?
Uh, no, actually. I think that if you deny kids vaccinations and they interact with the rest of society, then one kid getting sick could get a bunch of kids sick because the virus may mutate in some cases.
Yeah,
And
I agree with that.
that's basically my thing. My thing is really centered on it's more libertarian. I like to consider myself an Ayn Rand objectivist, libertarian, which is to say anything that I think, as far as libertarian, is something that can be rationalized, kind of thing. But I digress.
Okay, I think I
Um,
rationalized my positions pretty well too.
Brian, right, and there is, when it comes to, okay, authority in science is something that I am starting to hate, because I've always been sort of like an advocate, a practitioner of science. When I was 8, I took apart my first computer. When I was 18, I started to write my own AI. Now, this actually, that might be a pretty cool thing and very important and relevant. When I when I was 18, 19, somewhere around there, I tried to program my own AI. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make something like in Star Trek. It'll be cool, right? And I do that, and I start writing codes, and started creating this rule system. And then I realized, how will I make this smarter? Well, it'll remember. Wait, computer already remembers everything. Shit. Well, it can break super codes. Oh, wait, computers already do that. But what makes me different from a computer? And then that question of what intelligence was led me down this road to psychology and trying to figure out what the brain was. Okay.
Okay.
So, I'm trying to think, where was I? Shit. Damn. I also have ADD, and I do that as well.
Yeah, same.
Where was I? Okay, then his brain is going to contract.
Do you think the kids with Do
Neurology.
you think the kids with ADD should be diagnosed and treated?
Uh, yes, but
Why?
that's also not
That's
a permanent thing.
I mean, it can be. Like it affects the way you learn, and that can have long term effects, right?
Yes, but sorry about that. It can have long-term effects, but those could be positive effects,
So could puberty suppressants.
but they're reversible effects.
So are puberty suppressants.
No, I don't. I don't
They're
think so.
largely reversible. There are some things that are permanent, but they're largely reversible, based on the
So
literature that I'm familiar with.
you're telling me I could take hormones right now and my penis will fall off and I'll grow a vagina?
Yeah, that's basically how gender suppressants work. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, if you take
Okay.
puberty suppressants, whatever you have will fall off, and you'll grow a different one.
Right? Okay. No,
But
but
no, no.
seriously, it's not just that though. It's other parts of the body, including the brain.
Yes.
Like for every part of your body, there's a brain part that controls that part of your body. All right?
Yes.
And okay. Do you know how the evolution of the brain works as far as layers of the brain?
Yeah, it's really complicated, and then
It's
again,
it's
I'm
very it's
a
very
biomechanics guy.
it, it can get complicated, but there's a basic part of it which you can infer the rest above it, and that is the oldest parts of the brain are in the middle of the brain,
Yep, I believe that. Yeah.
and then we grow other things on top of it as we evolve. Now, reproduction is way in the middle of that. It's old, and it filters up through our cognition. That is why basically when we gain our sexual identity, our cognition rationalizes around it, and so we understand the world through that kind of filtering up. As far as that, okay. So, um, I mean, basically, that's what it's going to come down to for these kids. It's all about the development of the brains that could even possibly recognize their identity in the greater context of their full human experience. That cannot be done when they are that young.
Is there anything that you're saying that doesn't apply to cis kids as well? Should we not allow cis kids to say that they're boys and girls?
Cis kids, as we put it, is what has resulted from their birth, their biology, and that is sort of coming into being naturally. We're talking about the difference between intervention and things that we don't understand yet.
Yes, but but transgender people are natural as well. It's
We
not.
do not
It's
understand.
not synthetic. We don't pump transgender juices into the air, and that makes transgender people. They're as natural as cis people.
Mm. And you don't like the word mutation. How about deviation?
Deviation, I guess that's fine.
It's literally a deviation from what is normal. And admittedly, I'm admitting that a deviation or abnormal does not mean bad.
No, of course.
Just want everyone understand that. I'm not saying that's bad. Okay. But it does mean that it is a difference that has occurred naturally, but it is nevertheless a difference that has occurred.
Mm-hmm.
Now, our understanding of that is 100 years ago psychology. 40 years ago, really neuroscience. So that is a very tiny bit of time. We don't have enough knowledge about the subject before we can make permanent decisions on the behalf of minors. So that is my cutoff. That is the only way I can rationalize it is an adult can make decisions for himself. At 18 on the dot, they can change. But before that, we don't know for sure, and you gotta leave it up to a person to make their own decisions when they're an adult, but not children. Not children.
So when can a kid drive?
It's up to the parents.
I mean, the law says 16, but if they don't develop
They
for another
do.
9 years,
Right, and it does require a sign off on their parents.
so we allow like kids to apply for giant grants and giant like
Right.
competitions at 11 and
Right.
12. They can make decisions for themselves. Again, I'm
With,
having trouble like
with
why
parental consent.
why do all of these associations, psychological and medical associations, support puberty suppression in when it's called for? If it's
Because
just,
they're targeted. They're targeted studies.
do you think a medical profession with any integrity whatsoever would say, "Hey, we're not going to do this because other people say we shouldn't"?
Well, I don't know. Do you think Big Pharma would make drugs just for profit?
Yes,
Well, there you go.
not make drugs for profit, but sell them just for profit and mark them up. Yeah, of course.
Who do you think develops most of the medical technology on the planet?
Yeah, big pharma, sure,
There you go.
but
It's worthy of skepticism as far as the sources
yeah, of course. But then
because of things like that.
the fact that insulin is enormously expensive doesn't mean that diabetes doesn't exist.
You're absolutely right. There's
Yeah,
things
so
that
the
involve
fact,
that. Although they may have a cure for diabetes, but they don't want to share it. Who knows?
hey, if you want to push for single payer healthcare, I'm all for you.
I'm not opposed to the idea. I'm opposed to its implementation and method.
See, okay, you're not opposed to it existing, just it
How it's
being.
done.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm not prepared for that part.
Right. Yeah. But
But
that's it. Go
but
on.
yeah, but kids can make decisions, and we should respect their identities. And I can't get past this fact that all the studies that I've read on supporting trans kids and their identities support that, and all of the major psychological associations that I am familiar with say that yes, that is how we should treat trans kids. If they're very
Okay.
persistent in their gender identity, we should support them. And a lot of that is just social. Not every trans kid goes through puberty suppression. Some of them just stay socially, and then when they are adults, they do that thing you were talking about. But in some kids, in some cases, it gets so severe that if they go through the wrong gender puberty, they will experience immense psychological distress. Like their body is going to morph to a state that they are enormously uncomfortable with, and we've seen instances
Okay.
of that in the past
Well,
where
here. Let's apply it to anything else. See if the logic is sound. What we can do is we'll do an analogy to something else, such
yeah, sure,
as if somebody was born thinking they should be blind.
is
I
it
identify as blind.
sure,
I shouldn't be seeing these things because I'm blind.
sure.
Okay. So how do we correct that?
How much empirical research is there supporting the fact that if they blinded themselves, that they would be immensely psychologically better?
All right. Got me there. Hmm.
So I can tell you, I don't think there's anything wrong with
Well,
being blind.
the fact is, I mean, you do have a point, and I would admit that because I do like, I'm a scientist, not an ideologue. But the fact is also nobody has decided to put up money on researching that. So if I put money up to research something, and could you imagine doing a study on anything at all? You say you're an auto mechanic, okay? So we'll use auto as an
No,
example.
not auto mechanic, biomechanic. Sorry.
Well, biomechanic. I thought you said auto mechanic. Okay,
Yeah.
fine.
And
Bio. So you're
And I don't
bio.
I don't think that's what it's called, but I like that name. I'm a biomechanic.
Chemical engineer?
No, it's I'm a master's in biomechanics.
Oh, okay.
But
All
that
right.
sounds way better. Let's go with that.
All right. Well, so there you go. Let's see. What can I do as an example? Let's say I bio, my biology is hit or miss. It's mostly from the neck up and from the waist down. It's weird. But anyways, if I did a study on bacteria that would kill people, that would like cause whatever deadly bacteria, okay, and I took a sample of every bacteria that was deadly in the world, and then did a study on all of those and said, yep, 99% of these bacteria will kill you. Do you see a problem with that study?
Uh, well, I mean, I'd have to look at the actual methodology of it.
Okay, I took all of the bacteria that would kill you in the world, and then I put them into a lab, and I did growths, and I don't know. That's say I had rats, and I poisoned the rats with bacteria, and then 99% of the time they died,
And
and that was the entire thing. And my result was, yep, 99% of this bacteria will kill living things, whatever.
as long as you were upfront about like which bacteria you choose,
Right,
and that would be in your results, right?
right.
Right, and that would be in your methods, right? Like say, so yes, if we took a bunch of bacteria that are known to be deadly, and then it turned out that it was deadly.
Mhm.
That seems like just that actually seems like a science that we need more of, confirmation studies.
Right. Mm. But um, in this case, there was no other sample. Like, yeah, I would have taken all the like. I know it'd be impossible technically, but take all the samples of all the bacteria in the world, which is like 5 billion strains. It's not happening. But the point is, taking a sample of all the things that happen in order to find out how often it happens. In the case of trans, you got confirmation studies and only confirmation studies. Now, the way that you would go about creating a study about this so that it would be fair is, of course, if you had something on the other side, like children who were thought to be trans, which were treated as identity dysmorphia or something.
There are some studies on that.
Then,
James Cantor supplied 11 studies that said that most people who experience gender dysphoria go out of it as kids.
mhm.
But I actually read those studies, and his interpretation was enormously inadequate.
But nevertheless, the method of the study, as far as having, the proposed treatment versus the other treatment
Oh no, like
method.
most studies that he proposed, 7 out of the 11 were from before 1984, which remember there was no social support for
Right,
trans kids.
exactly. Hmm.
Half of them were not on trans kids. I think that's a pretty
Right.
big. Half of them were on effeminate boys, which is different
Yeah.
than trans kids,
Such a
which is
weird
way
thing.
different. And there were four in afterwards, but there were some methodological flaws in the four studies that they had afterwards.
Right. Right. Well, exactly. There is definitely flaws in that study because the context of the time, we knew even less about psychology back then.
Yeah.
And that's really where it comes down to. It is a study cannot be just a confirming study. It has to be in a greater context. Otherwise, you're talking about children who are already very flexible as far as their behavior. That's the whole point of being a child, is to learn about society, and then you develop yourself into being something that can fit into society. That is a social creature. That is a social animal.
Do you think we could pressure like you or me? So we're both cisgender dudes. Do you think that we could pressure you or me into being female and feel good about it?
No. No, but I do write a lot, and part of my writing does include female and trans characters of various kinds.
Okay, that's great.
Hmm.
There.
So I can imagine it. I feel like I can imagine it,
Well, yeah,
but I know
that's
that I
basic.
can't
That's
imagine it accurately.
well, I mean, that's basic human empathy, right? We can imagine how other people
Right,
feel, but in terms of
right,
your own identity, like
right. No,
how much pressure would it take for you to like take away your own like gender identity? For me, it would
I
take
mean,
a
I
lot. Like
I understand exactly.
I'm gay. It should be theoretically I should be already halfway there, right? According to a lot of bad people. But no, I'm a cisgender dude. Like I very much identify as being a dude. And if someone tried to make me identify it otherwise, I would feel immense psychological distress, even more so than I
Right,
already do now.
right,
So
exactly.
I would
But
I wouldn't want to push that on anyone.
you're a fully grown, fully developed male, whereas we're talking about children whose brains are still very plastic. So
I also felt
they
this way when I was 5 and
sure
9 and 17, though.
sure yeah. They happen. I actually recall, sexuality being present as young as 6 years old. And that's like about as far as my memory goes. But
Yeah, like,
no concept of identity and gender, nothing.
so why can't a kid can just change their mind, right?
Um, what do you mean?
A kid can say that, hey, I feel like a boy today, and then 2 years later say, actually, no, I like to go back to being a girl. That's
Right,
fine. We should support them in any direction, right?
but not children. No,
Why not?
no, because children are a unique case in which they cannot make, like, there's so many decisions that they cannot make. And why do we assume that one decision is different? See, that's really the crux of it. Is as far as when it comes to gender, like I said, like being gay is one thing. Um, it's really a flip of the coin when it comes to development as far as what you're attracted to. But gender identity is so goddamn complex.
It is
It's
very, very complex. That's
right.
why that's why we have a lot of things like non-binary genders. Like, it's okay for your kid to not to.
I don't. That's I believe in a spectrum of gender. I don't believe in calling everything down that spectrum something. That's just weird to me.
I mean, we have to call everything something, right? At the very least, just
Yeah.
say like the singular they, right? Do you at least agree with that?
I have no problem with using pronouns like that. Um, as long as I'm not forced to. Like I automatically do it as a courtesy. Like for example, I use with you a clarification of the not all people kind of thing. That's courtesy. But if somebody legally mandated that, then I would be so pissed about that. But
Right.
yeah, yeah, there is just it's like a temptation and forbidden whatever blah blah blah. Anyways, that's neither here nor there.
So what was your last point? I'm sorry. I also have
Is it,
ADHD.
it was about an identity as far as it being complex, too complex for a child to be able to accurately present.
Well, no,
Be,
because children have identities all the time, and they play with them all the time. I think it's perfectly acceptable to let a child like play with their gender identity just as well as any other identity. And if they change, it gets let them change. It's fine.
how about this? How about this? I have an idea. I have an idea. What if a, a hypothetical in which children can be allowed to present as any gender that they want, so long as those presentations are not a biological augmentation? Would you be cool with that?
I'm cool with that unless there's research to say that in some cases that's not enough.
Okay, you got to have opposing research if you're in this kind of
I already do.
field.
I already do. I already said that the kids of people who the kids who did get that kind of gender suppression therapy
Grew out of it.
grew into it.
They
Hold
grew
on a minute.
into it. Okay.
Yeah,
What
they
if I
grew
told
into it.
What if I told you, like I mentioned it before, but let me state it outright. What if I told you that children were extremely impressionable and you could turn them into anything you want, like putty?
You can't.
You can't, except that's how we evolved. And that's how we evolved socially speaking, is we would follow our parents. Have you ever seen a kid imitate his
Hold,
dad?
hold on. Do you think that we can like make a kid transgender if they're not?
Yes.
Do you think
Yes, I
that we?
do.
Okay, really?
Yes, I think, let me clarify that before you go on your tirade, because I know what you're going to say. Um, I think you can make a kid be comfortable with dressing as the opposite gender, um, to the limitation of their sexuality, which will remain innate. So
All
you
right.
could
Is
condition
that
a
is that a
kid
bad
to,
thing? Is it a
huh?
bad? Is it a bad thing? If you make your kid, well, if your kid turns out to be transgender and it's because of the way you raised them, is that a bad thing? I if you force your kid to be anything, I think we can both agree that's bad, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly,
if you
exactly what I'm saying.
have if you give birth to someone who's assigned boy at birth, and then you
Uh
tell
huh.
that boy, "No, you're a girl. You have to use she pronouns. You have to wear dresses, and you love
Right.
pink." I think
Right.
we can both
Well,
agree that that's bad, right?
it wouldn't. Yeah, it would definitely be bad, but it wouldn't have to be that. It wouldn't be. It wouldn't be like beating it out of them. It would be like, here you wear the, or you just dressing them up as a girl when they're a baby, and then as they turn 4 or 5, hey, put on your dress on. We're time to go out. Okay, and then they go and put on their dress, and then maybe someday they're still wearing dresses and shit,
Yeah.
and then he
What?
meets a girl, and then he sees the girl and he's like, wow, I don't know why, but she's just like super pretty or something. I don't know. The
Okay,
point is,
so yeah, so they're in that case they could be a straight boy who wears dresses,
hmm
and that's okay. You
it is.
ask them, you ask them, you let them determine their own gender identity.
hmm
Dresses are fucking comfortable. I don't know if you ever wore them, but
I have actually.
I know we should switch the clothes we wear because we got balls that get super sweaty, and a little more airflow would be great, right? Like kilts are the right idea.
That is the right idea there, but not the skinny jeans. No, I'm not doing that. But yeah,
Uh, I
that's
got
really.
I got a question from the chat. Josie West, do you think that gender dysphoria exists?
Do I think gender dysphoria exists? I think it would be a subcategory between identity disorder and dysmorphic disorder.
So you disagree with the DSM-5?
I do wholeheartedly.
So why do you think that those two? Why do you think that gender dysphoria, gender, is a subcategory of overall body dysmorphia?
Well, something's wrong with the way I look, and look is presentation. Like if it wasn't about how you look or how your body is, then you wouldn't need physical, you know, hormonal therapy, right? I
Maybe.
mean, that's
Yeah.
really what it is. In the case, if it requires hormones in order to fix it, then that is a statement that it is physical.
I guess.
Ergo, something is wrong with you physically, and you perceive yourself wrong, as well as the identity component, which is to say that gender dysphoria can be diagnosed by those two categories, and they do not need a third category as gender dysphoria.
So wait, they kind of do though because gender and body are different, right?
Well, they are different until you need hormones.
Like a lot of trans people don't take hormones. You know that, right?
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
a lot of trans women just shave frequently. A lot of trans men
Yeah.
just dress a certain way,
Yeah. I agree, and I
and it's
know.
about their
Yeah.
expression, right?
Exactly. I know. Yes.
So
But does that mean you should mandate hormones for transgender
yeah,
kids?
yes, I think you should force every kid who has ever experienced any sort of gender atypical behavior. I think you should force them to be on hormones.
Being
No, of course
sarcastic there.
not. Yeah,
Of
of
course
course
not.
not.
Yeah. No, but that's
Like,
what I don't mean you. I mean you as you. Oh, the royal or whatever the fuck. But that's my point, though. Is it a physical manifestation or is it a psychological manifestation of behavior? If it's
one,
behavior, then how
when
you look.
they're one and the same. Like there is a physical component to every psychological sensation, and it's like gender dysphoria. Mental disorders are a product of medicalization. Like it's not it's only a problem if we say it's a problem. It's a problem if society says it's a problem. Like
Well, yeah,
a lot of trans people say that if there were no gender binary, they wouldn't have any sort of disorder whatsoever. They wouldn't have gender
right.
dysphoria.
So that's what it is. I mean, look at over the past, what things we've gotten used to in the past up until now. The only reason why, there's actually is a fascinating thing. I did some research in the Bible as far as why they thought why they thought homosexuality was wrong. And I did some research on it, digging in history, and you can see like the reason why I bring it up is because you can see the things over time at which we became, accustomed to, and once we wanted to like, yeah, get out of here, you're disgusting, and now we're like, hey, come on in, you're welcome, something like that. And it's basically when it comes to our gender identity, you can create an environment that is absolutely neutral as far as school. You can do that by dress code, and then these things would happen naturally. You see what I'm saying? If everybody had to wear pants, if everybody had to wear this suit, and they couldn't wear makeup, boom, there you go. There's no way
Do
to
you
express yourself. Then
do you think
everybody's
that
on a
would
level
take
playing
do you
field.
think that would take away all gender expression though?
Why does gender need to be expressed?
It doesn't need to be expressed, but it is.
Well,
I'm,
yeah, but I'm
I'm
saying is
not
if you
prescribing.
limit,
I'm not prescribing an ought to expression. I'm saying that it's descriptive. It is
yes,
expressed.
but how is it expressed when you can't do certain things? Really, what it is,
Do you think
it comes
gender
down
is?
to.
Wait, do you think gender is limited to uniforms?
No, I just think it would help because definitely uniforms. Sexuality is a huge thing when it comes to gender expression because someone who identifies as one or the other is attempting, or I don't know I don't want to say attempting, that's the wrong word I'm looking for, but they want to be, or they are trying to be the opposite sex.
Opposite gender, or they're trying to be the gender that they are.
Sure, yeah. Well, put it that way. And then what is the stereotypical presentation of the gender they're going to pick up from people around them? Otherwise, it's going to be so.
Well, that's
If
why it's
you're
that's why it's immensely complicated because
exactly,
that's
that's
why there are very very effeminate men who still identify as men even though they have a lot of effeminate behaviors, and that's fine. That's why
hmm,
it's different. Like that's why we have to trust people when they tell us their identities.
hmm, hmm.
Yeah,
All right.
I
I
think
tell you what. Hold on.
good.
One, I am fascinated about this conversation, but two, we got to have an intermission at some point.
Okay, we're gonna intermiss now. Let's take a 5 minute break. Okay.
5 minute break. Okay, I'll be back.
All right, chat. We're taking a 5 minute break.
Okay, go.
So how we doing? Also, I am so sorry that I fucked up the beginning of that stream. In the past, all I've had to do was hit stream from OBS, and then it did everything. I tried it a different way this time, and apparently there's a go live button on the way that I did it this time, and that was yeah. I'm so sorry. So I apologize for screwing up the beginning of the screen. I'm actually really upset about that. I don't. I wonder if it's save when it saves the stream, if it's just gonna save the past like 45 minutes. All right, y'all have any questions? I throw them out. Tag me and throw them out. I'm gonna go to the bathroom really quick, but go ahead and tag me. Ask any questions you want to ask him, and I'll try to bring them up when we come back. Okay. Probably not. Ask him why he thinks the trans suicide rate is so high. Yeah, he said something similar to that. Here, he thinks it's 40%. And I felt like killing 40% of the time. He said that earlier. We'll see. That's what he actually thinks. Age of consent. I can't do that. I'm sorry, Ivan. I can't do that. Yeah, 40% according to this study is the attempt rate. The Williams Institute at UCLA said they found a 41% attempt rate. But that was not, they did not ask when the attempt happened. And so all they asked was, have you ever attempted suicide? Yeah, have you ever attempted suicide? That's all they asked. And so that if someone who hadn't transitioned yet attempted suicide, then transitioned and felt way better, they would still show up as a yes. So do not think that 40% of trans people attempt suicide, because that does not come from this study. You cannot extrapolate that from this data. Yeah, he's probably outside. That's all right. UBS. I'm sorry, Christy. Oh, I hope you're doing really, really well now, though. Okay.
Right on.
Hello.
Reloaded.
Reloaded.
All right. So.
All right. So
I
I
heard
have
somebody
I have
somebody
some.
mentioned something about age of consent. What the fuck?
Don't worry about that.
Okay.
I'm not going down that road. But I do want to mention something that you said in the tweet thread from the 21st, and someone mentioned it in chat. You said that 40%. It is literally killing boys and fathers at record rates, and out of that failed science, killing transgenders or gender dysmorphia patients 40% of the time. Do you still believe that 40% statistic is real?
When it came to my comment on that, it's because she was mentioning feminism, which has a whole other thing, and it's not even all the feminism. It's like it's intersectional specifically, and it gets down a whole fucking road of that shit. But when it comes to 40% of suicide attempts and the rate, I don't hold that it is 40% confirmed suicides.
Yeah, because it isn't. That came from nowhere.
Right. That was probably attempts that I was drawing from.
Which is very different.
Yeah, I will concede that, although 40% suicide rate for that
Attempted.
I mean, it's not even that high in depression.
Yeah, it's attempted. Yeah, isn't that high in
Right.
depression, but we don't know if that's in trans people. Like this says,
Yeah.
like some people like attempted suicide and then transitioned and then felt better. That's where I would be willing to bet a large sum of money that 40% statistic comes from someone misinterpreting this study from the Williams Institute that I have on screen right now.
Let me actually open it up.
because that's the only place it comes from.
There we go.
And that study also shows a
Yep.
lot of other things like discrimination, bullying, things like that.
Oh, now I got the window open. I forgot to open the window. Got to open now. All right. So yeah. All right. The Williams Institute suicide. Show me the statistics that suicide.
One sec, hold on. Copying the link for you.
Well, I got the video open now. So I don't know what the lag is actually.
I'm just gonna send it to you on YouTube, okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Or not YouTube. What's it called?
Twitter.
Twitter. That's the one.
Oh.
One of them.
There we go. Okay, let's see. Let's see, Williams Institute. On my big screen. Got 3 monitors. I wonder why sometimes. Why do we even have 3 monitors?
I only have 2, man. You're killing it.
Yeah, they got 3 monitors and my VR headset. So there you go. I'm also a computer tech, by the way. So there you go.
Oh, there it is. I'm not. That's why. That's why the first 30 minutes of this debate wasn't streamed.
Very good. All right. All right, there we go. And let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. All right, here we go. Graphics. Okay. And here we go. Yep. Okay. There we go. I found it. All right. So we got attempted suicide. Now, I do have a problem. Well, I do have a problem with the attempted suicide statistic, period. But that's another story. But it's not even a contradiction of anything. It's just I'm simply saying I don't like attempted suicide as a statistic because, I mean, when somebody is really depressed and they're having social issues, they will act out in order to get attention. That is all people, no matter what. And because it's kind of a side effect of our social nature. And so what is the percentage of that happens? And the only thing you can be sure of is that they are definitely not happy. And that's pretty much where I draw that line, so to speak.
Yeah, but so a lot of people misuse this. Like the survey didn't explore mental health status and history. Like people can be depressed irrespective of their gender identity.
Yeah, true. Yeah. But I do feel that it is still, like, even if this were half that, if 44%, if we go by the other genders and or cisgenders, male suicide versus female, like actual male female, which is to say biologically male and female suicide rates, I think what is it? The female suicide rates is something like 6 times that. Like successful suicide rates is like
70% of suicide attempts are women.
Right, and so there you go. So there's only 30% that are males, and then what do you got? Attempted versus successful.
This is actually in this study. So
is it?
Yes.
There we go.
Page 4. Page 4, top of the second column.
Gotcha. Okay. So there we go. Okay, there we go. All right, so 37.
By the way, I don't know when they say women and men.
There we go. I found it.
Yeah.
Found it.
I don't know.
So male and female. So male 60%, female 40%. That's still attempted.
80% of all suicide deaths occur among males, while about 75% of suicide attempts are made by females. Top of the right column of page 4.
There you go. Yeah, I see it.
And I looked at that source they provided. That's true.
You could take those. You could take that, and I feel that gives you a rough idea. Do they have actual suicide deaths? As first of all, it'd be hard to quantify that. Actually, you could definitely count who was male that died and who was female that died. How will you say, oh yeah, but this male was transgender? That would be difficult unless they were previously diagnosed, so it gets a little, rough in the data. But this
I
does
actually
say
have
something about human
a
nature.
I actually have a study called "Suicide and Suicide Risk in LGBT Populations." I'll pull this up on stream. Yeah, suicide and suicide risk in LGBT populations review and recommendations, and they don't have that data. They because a lot of it has to do with like when someone dies, you have to take their like family and like
Right.
say that yeah, this is what they actually were like
Right.
and stuff like that.
It's just weird. It's definitely a difficult thing to measure, but you can
Yeah.
tell something. You can tell something about suicide rates by attempts across genders. It just gives you kind of like an idea
Uh,
of how often it happens. It's not an exact. It's not an exact. Of course, it's not.
it's yeah, like it's not exact to the point where attempts do not correlate with completions whatsoever.
Right, right. But it can give you like a minimum range or something. It give you an idea. So I guess the point is, um, I mean, this is when it comes to suicide rates and this is a diagnosis. I mean, if they were diagnosed this and then they commit suicide, now it usually so happens when somebody gets the right diagnosis and they begin having any kind of like treatment, they typically get treatment after being diagnosed, no matter what thing they
Yeah.
are. And so they will kind of see that light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. Which is not death, say. I guess it's like hope.
Do you think
Hope
that
is, is
wait?
hope the light at the end of
Yeah,
the tunnel? I don't remember.
I hope so. I hope is at the light in the tunnel. But do you
Get the
think that
light.
all
Get the light.
do you think that all trans people are like will go through the process of being diagnosed with gender dysphoria? All right, someone just like
No, no,
right? Yeah.
I don't think so. But then, like I said, quantifying somebody who is not like I guess I'll use the term true transgender versus, some other kind of identity disorder. Dissociative identity, if that identity is female, looks like gender dysphoria. That's the problem when it comes to diagnosing it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Say it one more time.
If you have somebody who has an identity disorder, it is somebody who pretends to be, not, I don't want to say pretend, who identifies as something else as a defense mechanism for something. So they don't like who they are, so they want to be something else, so they'll pretend to be something else, but they'll do it unconsciously.
Or they do
Okay.
it. I mean, our behavior is unconscious. Like we are both cis men. A lot of our behavior is unconscious, right?
Right. Right. That's what it is, though. As far as diagnosing it, you can diagnose. I guess you can't really diagnose. It depends on the detail of it. But when it comes to an identity disorder that presents as a female, you cannot readily separate, as far as criteria, a gender dysphoria patient and an identity disorder patient. As
Because
far as
they're basically the same thing.
there you go. You're right.
I'm saying
That's that.
I trust the DSM-5 though.
But the DSM-5 is murky on that. It doesn't really make sense because there's already disorders that make up the criteria that's involved.
So, for example, someone who is socially transitioned and they were assigned male at birth, and now they go by she, her pronouns, and they dress in women's clothing, and they present as a woman, and doesn't have gender dysphoria, would never be diagnosed with gender dysphoria, right?
Sorry, say that again.
So hold on, I'm having trouble here.
I was misreading and
I was also misreading. This is what happens when you have two people with ADHD on a stream together.
yes, it's so productive. We're not paying attention. What's going on? They just split topics again. What's going on? That's great. It's great.
That's definitely it.
But somebody in chat can remind us.
Chat, chat, please help us. Where were we?
We're crippled. It's good. This is fun. This is interesting. I expected this to be a little more hostile, honestly.
I came close to peaking my mic a few times.
Oh no, you've actually done pretty well. I have run into people that straight up fucking yelling at me. It's like, are you serious? It's just terrible. You're like literally Hitler. I'm like, are you fucking serious? Serious right now?
All right, chat, please give us our maybe final topic, depending on how late we want to go.
There you go. This is gender. All right, found it. Okay. Oh, this is wrong. Where is it?
Yes, chat, we are very difference between dysphoric and non-dysphoric trans people. Christy Abbey is telling us her story.
There we go. All right.
All right, so with since the topic was treatment, so a lot of people with gender dysphoria get treatment for it, and the reason they don't have gender dysphoria is because they transition. Do you agree with that?
Because they don't transition treatment dysphoria. So when it comes to transition being the solution for individuals in which it was considered successful, then, I mean, if someone has an identity of not themselves, and then they succeed in that identity or succeed to become that identity, and that cures their problem, or they no longer have to have the pretense, was that a successful treatment? It's sort of like, it's like the question, but the question simply because it's about the diagnostic criteria. So if somebody really, really wanted to be or felt like they were a girl,
so
a boy,
gender dysphoria isn't feeling like you're an opposite gender. It's feeling anxiety and it's essentially immense anxiety that you're not the gender that you present as.
which is kind of similar to wanting to be that gender.
Kinda, but it's why not all trans people have gender dysphoria. Some people have transitioned and feel amazing and are very comfortable and supported in their gender, and therefore they don't have gender dysphoria even though they are trans.
But then how would you qualify, or how would you measure, as far as criteria?
Ask.
You ask somebody for their diagnosis.
Yes. You ask how they're feeling. That's that's literally how we do a lot of scientific research. All pain research is that what you just described. That's all pain research. And
Well,
pain
yes.
is a pretty important medical component, right?
Actually, that's not all of pain research. Actually,
Yes, it is. It's all subjective. I know.
Yeah.
I know for a fact we cannot measure pain objectively. It's all subjective. I'm very confident in saying that.
That's definitely true. We do measure sensory detection. So like when you feel
Sensory
this
detection, but that doesn't mean pain.
Right.
We can make no
Okay,
because we can
all right.
we can measure like the neurological components and like the what's it called hold on, I know the actual word for it. I know what I'm thinking of. I've had too many beers. We can measure like the electrical components of the pain receptors, but we can't measure how that translates to pain because
Right.
it's very 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 subjective.
Right. It's often trained in some cases.
But yeah, so
Trained
that's why in any case that's not what matters. What matters
Right.
is how someone feels. That's actually the only important part of pain is how someone feels.
Right. Then, well, yes, and when it comes it's really hard to get, but the association is very important as far as identity disorders and dysphoria.
Yeah. So if
Like
you
I
say
said-
if you say you feel enormously uncomfortable in your own gender identity right now, yeah, that's very
Right.
important. But if
Right.
you feel very comfortable in it, that's also enormously important. That's why we ask
Right.
people. There's no objective way to measure that.
Well, yeah, well there you go. That's right. There's no objective way to measure that, but also if I what is the difference between me feeling uncomfortable as being male and feel that I should be female, and as opposed to me being uncomfortable with being a computer technician and computer science researcher and feeling that I need to be an astronaut?
About 20 decades of empirical research.
That's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. What I mean is what what would you write down? The DSM is measuring criteria and asking them certain questions. What question would you ask me that would differentiate one from the other?
I don't pretend to be a psychologist who is
I'm
capable.
not. I'm not suggesting that you would know like to that end. But what I'm saying is that there's not the questions asked are very similar to a point where they could be the same thing, just in the context of gender.
No, tell you what. Well, one, computer and gender are different things, right? So if you 100% felt that you were a computer, and there was empirical research to say that you identify as a computer would improve your mental well-being, I'd be for it.
Well, yeah, and I wouldn't have a problem with it either. Then remember what my threshold is.
Yeah, but there's a
Kids,
but there's a difference between careers and identity, right?
sure, but
If you identified as a computer and identify as a computer would improve your well-being, and society is saying that yes, you identify as a computer and that's how you want to identify, and that's good. If that empirically improved your well-being, I'd be in for it.
and
Just like I'm in favor of
actually,
transgender people.
I would be for it too. Again, it is the physical treatment involved that I have a threshold when it comes to kids, just kids, in fact.
Just kids.
I don't care if you feel that you were born and you were meant to be a quadriplegic and you wanted to cut off your limbs at 18 years old because you wanted to do that. Fine. It's just before that point, because all of that brain development that is involved and contextually in gender, because gender makes up a huge part. Because if you believe in evolution, you do believe in evolution.
Yes, we do.
Good. Then you know that the brain is a biological thing. It is an organ.
Yes.
And you know that only the neocortex and the upper cortex, the higher brain functions, are the plastic bits, which is to say that the very top of our brain is the only parts that change through our lifetime.
To that I say, I
No, but that's it. That's your thinking bits. That's the top of your brain. That's your cortex, your
don't
neocortex,
know.
cerebral cortex. Those are the parts that you learn behaviors and shit through. But underneath that, that's your lower functions, your heartbeat and your brain stem, for example. Hunger in your hypothalamus, addiction as well. Things underneath it. That's why people who are addicted, they're addicted at the level of the hypothalamus. They are unable to like decide to get out of it because they are addicted at that low level of the brain, and their addiction filters up through cognition and they rationalize. So it's like a feeling before thinking, and that feeling turns thinking into acquiring that addiction. That is how the brain works. That's how it works as far as mating as well, mating instincts. They filter up through the cognition, so you feel the feeling and you cannot escape that feeling. Your brain rationalizes around it, and that is how we construct our worldview when it comes to our biological
I
functions.
correct me if I'm mischaracterizing you. Are you saying that the way we feel feelings when we desire drugs is the same way we feel feelings when desiring gender?
Closer to sex, but sex makes up a huge part of gender, but not all of it, not always.
Yeah.
And it has to do with lower functions of presentation as well. How we perceive the world and how we perceive ourselves are going to be those basic functions filtering up through our cerebral. If we only had a cerebral cortex, and that could control our whole body. Now, forget the part that we would forget that our heart needed to beat and we would stop beating our heart and we would die. But forget that. Let's just say that it was all that and it was all plastic. Then we could be literally anything that we wanted to be from birth. If we wanted to be a car, we could build a car, get in the car engine spot, and then we'd be like, vroom, vroom, we're a car, whatever. But that's how plastic the cerebral cortex is. However, underlying brain functions are not that plastic.
I say,
that
yeah.
include.
Is there any research whatsoever to say that we can identify as a car or identify as a computer?
I, I'm being hyperbolic in that sense.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm being empirical. I want to know, like, we have a lot of research saying that trans people exist and they identify as the gender
If
they
you
weren't
could
assigned at birth.
if you could learn how to be these things, then you could be them mentally. If we were just cerebral cortex, because that is that plastic. That's what I'm trying to make the point about. Things underneath that are not plastic; they are static. That's the difference
Do you think
between the
that
parts of the brain.
Do you think that I or any trans person would say that they are like biologically the same as a cisgender person of their identified gender? Biologically?
Uh, I I don't think so. I hope not.
No, no, I wouldn't say that. But
Why?
I'm saying that they are. I'm very supportive in my declaration that trans women are women, trans men are men,
Yeah, yeah.
and
And I
also
actually I follow. I
non-binary people exist.
and I follow some transgender people. She prefers to be called a tranny, but still, I'm a little weird about that word.
Yeah,
But
don't
nevertheless,
use that word.
yeah. But she insists that yeah, it's fine to call her that, whatever. But the point is, I have absolutely no. I have no problem being around them, interacting with them being them, anything like that. Really, like I said, once again, my threshold comes when it comes to children, and then treating them for it. That's literally it. Because the science is so young. That is it. And then I know that we get the diagnosis wrong sometimes because we don't know enough about it.
Well, of course, we can diagnose it wrong sometimes, but we can diagnose
Right.
our other things wrong sometimes.
Sure. Yeah. But this is the only Let me make sure. Let me go through my memory here. Yeah, I think this is the only diagnosis that I know in psychology that implements a physical permanent change. I think
It's not a physical permanent change any more so than any other treatment is.
because you
If
think
you
it can be
it,
reversed.
yeah, if you take insulin as a type 1 diabetic, that is a permanent physical change.
Okay, remember that one famous case you were saying?
Which one?
The one famous case about genitals being abnormally small because they paused
No,
puberty.
the famous case I was saying is that there was a boy with a botched circumcision, so they just like
Oh
took it
no!
out.
Oh shit! So you don't know about this? Okay. He's a YouTuber. Um, I can't remember what the fuck her name is. I'm bad with names and numbers and specifics and shit. That's like my brain's handicap.
Oh yeah, me too. That's
Do you
what
know
it's
what?
like being ADHD.
It took me 6 months to remember my girlfriend's phone number.
I don't know my husband's phone number. We've been together for 7 years.
Well, you also probably have his Hangouts indoor messaging, so it doesn't matter. Okay, let's see. That's kind of recent. Let's see. Where the fuck? Oh god, I can't remember the fucking name. Ask chat. Yeah, chat. What was that one trans girl's name that went into transition surgery, but the penis was too small to make a vagina? Anybody know?
I think I know who you're talking about, but I remember like Jazz Jennings.
Yeah, is Jazz Jennings? Is that it? I'll know when I see the picture. Yes, that is the person I am referring to. I remember this case. He, she, trans, whatever, had too small of a penis to make a vagina during transition surgery, and there was a problem with that. Yeah, and that's a case of pausing puberty, and we have very few cases of actually studying this. This is one of those cases, and that's really, where I am with this now. When puberty is complete and everything is developed, you can reassign it the gender and have maybe not minimal, but minimal complications as far as being able to function as the sex that you prefer to be. But if you pause it and then try to resume it, then things will not grow because associated with growth are other hormones, like for your bones, for your skin, for your eye development, the rest of your brain development. Those are different hormones, different genetic code, in which you're pausing half of it, or not half of it, but a fraction of it, but letting the rest of it go. But it needs the rest of that in order to complement the things that need to grow during puberty. All right. Did that make sense, or was that
I,
just
I,
ranty?
my ADHD kicked in, and I was looking at the Jazz Jennings case in USA Today.
Oh, that's fine. It's fine. I actually remembered what I said that time.
Cool. So what'd you say?
It's basically explaining when it comes to genetic triggers to growing parts of your body, or just your whole body in general, your development in general. Okay, so when you pause some things with hormones, okay, there are other things in your body which continue to grow because they are not responsible with those hormone triggers. But those hormone triggers and those developments are intertangled, intertwined with sexual development triggers, which means when you try to pause and then resume sexual development, things will already be developed and those hormonal triggers will stop. So they are already developed, but this has not developed. So only partial development will happen when you resume it, which is why that is bad to pause puberty. Okay?
Well, you said bad, like it's prescriptive, right?
It's bad in the sense that it will not, you could not resume the development normally if you pause it.
Well,
That
how long would you have to be under puberty suppressants for that to be a very big issue?
that's a good question. I think
Like,
in the
if you were,
context,
do you think that if you were under puberty suppressants for long enough to where it would cause an issue that you're probably going to stay trans?
but would you be comfortably trans? Because certain triggers would be in place that would continue because more things make up gender than just, your junk.
According to the study that I have pulled up, yes, that is the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Young adult psychological outcome after puberty suppression and gender reassignments. I can't. Where's it published?
But again, you got to look at that method. Now I am like, once again, I am not opposed to the concept of this in practice, or in theory, and even in practice once we have the theory down. But you have to look at the method because there's got to be control. Like you got ones that have undergone this suppression. You have to have ones that have not.
It's very hard to get controls in situations like this.
I agree, and that's like I said, and still even then I take the libertarian perspective on it because we don't have that other study. We have to wait until children are old enough to decide for themselves, at least legally. Frankly, that's just how you got to go about it. It's if nothing else, it's not what's the word, a rejection of the concept of transgenders. It is merely saying we don't know for sure. Let's just be cautious. Call it pragmatic progressivism.
Yeah, I consider that too. Like, let's be cautious in all
Right.
permanent changes. But I don't see how that differs from current perspectives.
Well, the differing from current perspectives would be that transgender would be acknowledged over identity disorder. So, for example, while I acknowledge identity disorder and I say, they look a little similar to gender dysphoria, I'm not saying that, all gender dysphoria is absolutely identity disorder. I'm not saying that. I'm saying is they look similar. We need to come up with more criteria. We need more research to do that. But the libertarian perspective, if somebody at 18 years old feels that they should be female, they should be allowed to transition.
Yeah,
Fuck
but
what anybody says.
I definitely agree with that. But also, like, with kids too, because kids, unfortunately, and this is horrible, kids do commit suicide.
Yes, I know. In fact, that's what started a lot of shit because I had the misfortune of being tricked into watching a 12-year-old girl commit suicide live on Facebook, and it freaked me out for life.
Yeah, I
Like,
imagine it would.
it freaked me out. And it was so heartbreaking. It was like the words, god damn. Like, I remember what she said. She was like referring to somebody on the internet, and she's like, "I'm sorry, I'm not pretty enough." And I'm like, "Are you fucking serious? What's going on here?" And then she puts her up in her. I'm like, she can't. She's not gonna do it. She's not gonna do it. She's upset, and she's just her mom's gonna come out at any time. And she jumps off the fucking bucket, and there you go. And nobody came for her, and her mom was a fucking cunt. Sorry for my language. But yeah, to this day, and I always remember that. I'm like, geez, I don't want these kids fucking killing themselves anymore. And that's sort of influenced my study.
Yeah, but all of the research that I've been able to find say that transitioning reduces that. You're going to see less instances of that.
I'm saying, and you actually, you even already know this, that research is confirmation research and is one-sided. I'm not saying that it's wrong.
Whoa,
I'm not saying that it's wrong.
I'm not saying it's one-sided either. I'm saying it's one-sided in terms of results, but that doesn't mean it was one-sided in terms of intention.
But you don't have a sample for the other side. You're just measuring like you're looking at.
Okay, so the other side, there shouldn't be sides in scientific research. Like
absolutely. So in this case, yes.
So it doesn't matter that we have only one side in climate change. It doesn't matter that only one side is supported in science. That's fine because it turns out that's the correct side.
Okay. If somebody came up to you with a flat Earth theory and said, "The Earth is flat, prove it wrong," what would you tell them?
I would tell them look at the research.
Or you could say, "Well, how do you explain the shadows?"
I wouldn't even say that. I would say look at the research.
I know, but that explains everything. The shadows on the ground from the sun are proof of the Earth's curvature.
Are they?
Yeah. Yeah, right. Because when you have the sun going overhead and it goes to another angle of the Earth, the shadow gets longer, and then you can take a shadow from here, and you can take a shadow from another place. It's going to be different shadows.
Not to derail the conversation, but that could just mean that the Earth is the center of the universe and the sun goes around to make those different shadows.
No, because it's geometry. When you have the sun at a certain angle, it makes a shadow of a certain length. No, hold on.
Let's get back to.
I am making this, but what I'm trying to tell you is that it's about. Oh damn! You made me lose it. All right, fine. But the point is, you disprove something which is the opposite by showing things that cannot be true by things you've discovered. So if somebody says, "Well, what about this?" and you say, "Well, what about this?" and then you're essentially disproving the opposite, the opposing side, by showing evidence of what you have here. And that's why you need two sides. Even if the other side is absolutely absurd, it still needs to be respected to the end of something as an alternative idea. Now, in the case of flat Earth,
science doesn't show. But science doesn't show absurd sides. It shows empirical evidence whenever it's peer-reviewed and done correctly.
Right. And yes, I admit that flat Earth is a bit of an extreme example, but it was an extreme example in this case of understanding. Now,
there are no peer-reviewed flat Earth studies, right?
Are there any peer-reviewed studies of transgender possibly being identity disorder?
I don't know. If there is, I'd like to see them.
There are not.
No, there are not. That's proof in my favor, right? I'm looking for peer-reviewed studies in any direction.
Oh shit! Battery's about to die. Get my fucking charger before I die.
I will say if most studies said that transitioning harmed trans people, I would be against it. This is going to get me in trouble with some people in the SJW left, and I am very much in the SJW left. But they don't. They say that transitioning helps.
Okay, do you think that I have a dislike for transgenders from your observation of me?
I honestly don't know.
Do you think that I actively hate them?
Actively hate? No.
Okay. Now I understand that there are those gray lines when it comes to somebody not supporting something versus somebody hating them, and they think they're the same thing because if you don't actively support blah blah blah. But my point is,
Well, actively supporting is very close to, liking. And
right,
not supporting is very close to hating.
but not necessarily the exact same thing because somebody not doesn't know fucking thing about anything of it. They will not support it, but they don't hate it because they don't know what the fuck it is. All right. So, anyways, moving from there, when it comes to the research, yes, we have a lot of studies that say what happens when we do this. And then you say, oh, well, most of the time they're fine. But I say that, well, I know that children are very plastic. They can be anything depending on what you condition them to. So if you have a bunch of kids that are in a study and then they show that they're fine after transitioning and it's benign in some sense, in the most part, then I'm saying, well, is it okay to force kids or not force kids to introduce kids to the idea of transgender transitioning, and we find out that they do transition correctly? Does that mean that they were to begin with, or
Wait,
what?
who cares? The only thing that
Because it's
matters is
children.
how they turn up. The only thing that matters is how happy are they after the end, right?
Well, you can. There's happy children in Islam that are throwing gays off of roofs.
Whoa! I mean, okay, ignoring that.
I'm not trying to be, what the word I'm looking for is not a shock. What I'm saying is there are children that are happy in so many situations.
Yes,
That's my point.
and if they harm other people, we
That is
can talk
bad.
about that, yeah. But
Right.
trans
Okay.
kids don't harm other people by being
And
trans.
no, they do not. And I'm not saying that they're harmful in any way. I am saying that it cannot be proven beyond a reasonable doubt that they are, from a biological context, trans and thus needing physical treatment. And we won't know until we do more research on the cause and what identity is. That's it.
So until we do that, what
Yes,
happens?
I think it should be taken with a libertarian context. Kids cannot be medicated, and parents cannot be forced to medicate their
No,
kids.
wait. We have to take that further. Kids can't determine their own gender.
Right.
So there are no boys before you're 18. When you're
Sure.
18, you pick what you are, right? That's the
Right.
libertarian mindset.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. That works for me.
So when you're like before then, everyone like you're not actually a boy, you're not actually a girl before you're 18.
Well, no, I'm not saying that they
No,
are or aren't something.
they
I'm
can't
saying
choose
that
that, right?
what?
They can't choose that. They're not old enough.
They cannot take that medical action until they're old enough.
No,
No.
they can't choose that.
Well,
They
they can
can't.
choose it
No,
theoretically.
wait. They can choose either way.
They can choose to enact a role and identify as something. They cannot or should not be able to perform a medical intervention until they are old enough.
Even if that medical intervention helps them.
And like I said, there is no other side to that study, so I think the science is too young to involve children in it.
I don't understand this notion that because there's no science going the other way, that the science going the one way is not valid.
Uh, well, yeah, that is a good question, but it's about there is another possibility to it. I mean, literally speaking, and I'm not saying this is the case. Let me just lay that down. It could be that a prevalence of identity dysphoria, and they chose to be, and they identify as being a girl because of some reason they like the traits and they want to associate with those traits. Maybe not. Not saying it is or isn't, but it is, by our understanding of psychology, possible. But we haven't done a study on it because nobody has chosen to ask the question, and by doing so, ruled it out because it is technically measurably possible.
It
It's
is
not as
measurably
ridiculous as spider.
possible, and we've done studies, and it hasn't occurred. what happens? What doesn't that mean that maybe kids who are persistent in their gender identity are trans and we should support them because they are, not because all of the studies looking at that has said so.
Then I'd still have to ask, what is gender?
Gender is
Complicated.
very complicated and separate from sex.
Yes.
But
But if you can't quantify it, how can somebody diagnose it with and quantify it?
can you quantify like any sociological construct? Can you quantify words?
Yeah, I can quantify words.
Really?
Yeah, pick a word.
Pick a word. Word.
Sure, word. Word is used to identify the thing that you create symbolic meaning with, which can be either written or it can be a sound.
Okay, why is it pronounced word?
Well, but the word itself, the symbol is irrelevant. It is what it represents. That's literally true.
Because
symbolic language.
we agree that the pronunciation of word means word, which means the thing you said.
Oh, I could call word bum bum and it would still mean the same thing if the definition is the same.
Yep.
But we identify it.
If we
It's
all
symbolic language.
if we all agree that bum bum means word, that's it.
Right. But what does gender mean? Give me the definition of gender.
Yeah,
Word has a definition.
whatever we all agree it means.
What does it mean?
I don't know.
I know. That's my point.
Gender is what we think gender means. That's
Right,
it.
But what does gender
I
mean?
don't know what.
I know.
What do what do you think being a man means?
Oh,
We can associate traits with it, right?
no, I mean, I don't think I have enough. long
Being
list of
being
traits.
tough and being masculine, whatever that means.
I think it actually has to do with the honor code. Honestly, I think
Honor
I think
code, like
honor code. Yeah.
yeah. And when you start trying to define it, you realize that there's not that actually big a difference.
Yes. And I'm right there with you. That's my point, actually. I mean, if you can't quantify what gender really is, because gender roles are fluid, they do change. They do change throughout history. Like 100 years ago, to be a woman was to wear pretty dresses and to take care of the family and to take care of her husband, blah 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 blah, etc. But today it means something different. There's still some aspects of that. It's not all of it, but a respectable medium between the two because society has changed. Gender is fluid in that sense. So what is gender? Is a definition that we can't really quantify. It is just something that sort of happens. It's sort of like a society popular vote.
Right. So
And it
if we can't quantify it, and it's very hard to put
Then
into
how does a child know?
because they do. Like you realize your argument against any child being able to tell you their gender, right?
Well, I am saying that the definition of gender has a problem with it because of this. Now, if gender has a complete identity when it comes to, when you're a child, when you're an adult, and there's two different ways what it means to interact with society as being a boy, as a girl, as a man, as a woman, something in between, there is definitely differences between them, and there are no solidified definition to what that is. So then how in the fuck can a doctor say, oh, this is totally he identifies as female, this is why, blah, blah, blah. You can't be done. It makes no logical sense.
It makes sense logically that if someone tells you that they are X, that they think that they are X.
I think
and
I'm
if they're
psychic.
consistent and they are X.
But if I'm saying I'm consistently psychic.
Okay, one, you got to get a different joke. You got to get a different joke.
All right.
Because gender is a biological thing that we can measure in trans people, and we can measure it neurologically to some extent. It's not just, I think I'm X, therefore I'm X. It's deeper than that.
Well, the studies that we have show that there is maybe slight differences when it comes to the tracks, the white matter in the brain. And there's similarities between them.
As well as, hold on, let me pull it up. Come on now. Why am I so terrible at this?
Mhm.
As well as yeah, INAH3 as well as BCTC. Trans boys who had not been exposed to testosterone but who had female pubertal hormone suppressed displayed less activation in the frontal brain during exercise. So, distribution of gray matter in trans adolescents were similar to cis participants of the same natal sex, but there were differences in specific subregions. Like, it's
Mhm.
complicated. It's not a
Mhm.
one-to-one thing. It's very complicated, and there are a lot of
Yeah.
brain.
Yes, I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you. I think it is very complicated, and according to the studies that we find, and if you read the exact studies and you understand the exact data that comes out of it, it is saying essentially there are similarities here, but this also is here. And then when you read other studies in a meta, when you do a meta study, which is to say multiple study multiple
A
studies that study
meta-analysis,
similar
yeah,
things,
I know.
right? Right. Then you see that other things were studied the same thing and they have different roles in them and they study them and do different things. And
So,
so what you end up finding is a confirmation study in which you say, yeah, they all have something similar, which can only prove one thing, and that is their emotional. There's
so,
something about their emotions that is different because of the white matter.
yeah, so you agree that meta-analyses are a thing.
Oh yes, of course I do.
Why didn't you agree with the Cornell University findings on transitioning for trans people then?
Because they did not specifically study other people who were diagnosed who underwent alternative treatments.
What alternative treatments are there for trans people? To tell them to
Identity
not?
disorder. I know identity disorder treatments.
What is that? To tell them to not?
No, you don't tell them to not. What you do is you medicate them. I think the same medication for identity disorder goes with anxiety. So they're treated as anxiety patients. So they're given something like alprazolam, or on the extreme, they're given alprazolam. Some are given Paxil. Some are given.
All right. Can I read you something from the findings of that Cornell study? Or
What do you
that
got? Go
Cornell.
ahead.
All right. Transgender individuals, particularly those who cannot access treatment for gender dysphoria or who encounter unsupportive social environments, are more likely than the general population to experience health challenges such as depression, anxiety, suicidality, and minority stress.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, people who cannot access treatment for gender dysphoria or who
Right.
are not supported in their gender identity are way more likely, whereas people
Okay.
who can and who are less likely to be to have suicidality and anxiety and substance use.
Change the sentence out of transgender and imagine it as literally any other disorder. People who go without treatment of disorder will experience the suicidality.
Yes, I agree with that, I guess.
Now, if it were identity disorders, then it would reach the same conclusion. People who are not treated for identity disorders could end up committing suicide. Now,
But the way they were treated is to transition.
right, they were treated with a
Like,
transition.
so in your analogy here, you have to make sure that they transitioned into the identity that they identified with.
Right, right. So if you want it to be some, or not want it to be, but if you, well, technically, identity is the unconscious wanting and then enacting. So if you were had an identity disorder and then you made them that identity, that would present the same as curing them. But what if it was unsuccessful?
Then you would do a different treatment.
You would do a different treatment, or it would lead to something more significant and permanent. That's really what it is the case.
Okay, regrets following gender transition are extremely rare and have become even rarer as both surgical techniques and social support have improved. Pooling data from numerous studies demonstrate a regret rate ranging from 0.3 to 3.8%. That's pretty good.
Okay.
Like 0.3 to
Now,
3.8%. Regrets are most likely to result from a lack of social support after transition or
are
poor surgical outcomes using older techniques.
okay, so are we measuring people that have committed suicide in that statistic?
No, because you would have to ask them things.
Right. that's a big deal, don't you think? Like if it was unsuccessful, how would it present? It would present as them killing themselves. So you need a study that includes post-transition and suicidality.
All right. So is there a study that does that?
I can't find one.
The one people always say is the Sweden study.
But would you say that is an important question to ask?
Yes.
Yes, there we go.
And this study asks that.
It asks people who have transitioned after they died if they were unsatisfied.
This study says that the poor outcome in the present study might also be explained by a longer follow-up period compared to previous studies. In support of this notion, whatever. Increased mortality from 10 years after sex reassignment surgery and onwards. In accordance, the overall mortality rate was only significantly increased for the group operated before 1989. However, the latter might be explained by improved mental health care for transsexual persons during the 1990s, along with altered societal attitudes towards persons with different gender expressions. This was the transgender study. If you have ever heard a statistic that says that trans people after transitioning commit suicide at a greater rate than their cisgender peers, I guarantee you it's from this study.
Right. Well, in any case, you have a study that says otherwise. Specifically.
This study says otherwise.
This study says otherwise.
Yes, in this paragraph, the one I just read to you, the mortality rate dropped after 1989. And it might be explained by improved health care and societal attitudes.
Okay. So are there any other factors now? Were they prescribed any additional medication?
This is what they say: societal attitudes and improved healthcare. That could include medications.
So if you were anxious about anything at all, and I gave you a prazolam, do you know what a prazolam is?
It's an anti-anxiety medication.
It is Xanax. Xanax. So if I gave you that, then all of your anxieties would go away socially or otherwise, and it would be a great way to keep you from, getting too upset if I just prescribed that to you. Also, it would be addictive, so that's a bad thing. But nevertheless, there are certain medications that were invented after certain dates. There were certain treatments that were invented after certain dates, including surgery and cosmetic surgery and transition surgery was actually evolved during, I think, 2002. I don't know when he invented that. And so there's all these fucking variables. And all these variables add up to one thing.
Transitioning surgery has been around for a long time. Like this study was from, I think, 1973. It's been around for a while.
Mm-hmm. In the 1973, they put all their money, balls to the wall, and said, let's do research on this, right?
I think this study in particular was just a longitudinal study. Not longitudinal, but they took medical records.
Right. But that's 1970.
1973, yeah.
That's very young. That's young research. And the brain is immensely complex.
It
like
is.
Super complex. We don't even know what it does. I'm actually, loosely, admittedly, involved in the Connectome project. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Connectome project is basically the genome project, but for the brain. It involves taking a shit ton of fMRIs, and you're learning what bits of the brain do what under certain circumstances. fMRIs are functional magnetic resonance, and that's like when your brain does something, it lights up, and you scan it, and you see what's lighting up. That's what fMRIs are.
Okay.
So I am helping to read some of these because I do research primarily in education technology. I assist in the development of user interfaces for educational software for different applications, as well as classroom design. And then I make money by doing forensic data recovery. So that's like my worldview there, in the world, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. So we're looking at the Connectome project, and we're learning what bits of the brain do what. So the things that we find in there would shock you. And for some reason, they've actually gone silent as of 4 years ago. Shit, I lost my train of thought. God damn it.
That's how we do
ADD
it.
strikes again. Anyways, all right, but I'll just break it down. I'll just break it down to my ultimate point now, and it really is The science is young. We haven't even mapped the brain yet. This is some of the stuff that we're doing, the Connectome project included. And we're not done with that. And we still don't know what bits of the brain do what exactly in context to others, in concert with others.
That's true.
We should, at the very least, take libertarian perspective on kids. Because once you physically change kids, they cannot change back.
They can. Like, kids can change at all points.
To a degree. It does separate sex from gender quite a bit, which I am reasonably certain that sex and gender are intertwined to a certain degree.
To a certain degree, but
with the exception of homosexuality, which would also influence it and reflect upon it, because it's not only somebody presenting as a gender, but as somebody attracted to the same gender, which means that when you present as the gender, that the opposite who presents the same gender, blah blah blah.
But we know that sex differences in the brain are determined in utero at a much later stage than sex differences in the genitals, right? That's in utero development. Like your junk develops before your brain does.
Yeah, and your junk develops your brain.
No, your junk develops before your brain does.
Right.
And your junk doesn't develop your brain. Your mother develops your brain.
No, she develops part of your brain. That's actually part of our evolution. That's why we are born. Like, have you ever seen? I don't know. Fuck it. Have you ever seen like a deer being born or some shit? 15 minutes later, the deer walks away. The doe, or whatever, the fawn, whatever the fuck it's called.
I'm having trouble seeing how this relates to humans, though.
It does relate to humans, because when another animal is born, it is able to get up and walk the fuck away and then go start eating something immediately after born, because their brain is developed. Our brains are not. Our brains are so underdeveloped that we are basically these crippled little things that just like wave our stumps around and be like, and we got to be taken care of for like 3-5 years. That's how underdeveloped we are when we are born. Now, outside of the body, we develop our brains as well. Is our genitals are formed, but they're not grown, and then our brains develop in accordance to what we are biologically.
Well, yes, but they develop separately from one another. Like, so from Bio and Swab, sexual differentiation of the human brain in relation to gender identity, sexual orientation, and neuropsychiatric disorders from Frontiers in Neuroendocrinology. Sexual differentiation of the brain takes place at a much later stage in development than sexual differentiation of the genitals, and it can be influenced by independently of each other.
Yes, part of that is true, and in fact, I think it said that part of it was true. I think it said that it was half true. And then that is that not all of the sexual functions and not all sexual development is happens at birth and is there. But we're talking in later in life, it ends up developing after puberty. And it's also things that are entangled with our sexual development, such as aspects of our brain that end up growing a bit bigger. Like, that is why our spatial reasoning is so freaking different. I mean, have you ever seen? No, this.
You'd have to see averages, though, right?
I see averages, and I know what you're saying, that there are exceptions. Yes, there are exceptions, but those exceptions are measurable, and they're not even that significant. I mean,
they don't have to be significant. Like, trans people are what, 5% of the population at the most.
Yes.
So if you took a sample of 10 little boys assigned at birth and 10 little girls assigned at birth, it's very likely you can get 0 trans people, right? That's pretty likely, right?
Yeah, that's true. But there are also dependent biologies, such as genital function, requiring certain hormones to function. So if you don't have the full hormone, you will not be able to reproduce. Or even try to.
That doesn't have anything to do with trans people.
Sure, that rules out to
like
anyone.
Okay,
that's one measurable thing.
So do you think that humans have a biological need to reproduce? A biological drive to reproduce.
Yes.
So why don't I have that?
You do.
I don't.
I know you're gay. I get that.
Yeah.
You say gay, right? Is that the right word?
Yes.
No.
I'm gonna take someone else's kid, but I ain't gonna have my own.
No, but my point is, you still have the drive. It's just a different target.
Yeah, but
That,
some people, gay and straight, don't want to have kids.
sure.
Why?
Well, they know because the urge to reproduce is not the urge to. I just have this insatiable desire to just spawn a tiny human of my own. No, no, no. We're talking about the drive to mate, and that is our urge to reproduce. So it's like abstract, and it has a result, but we have the urge to just do an act. That's how that works.
Maybe, but also like sex drive is different than reproductive drive, right?
Well, no, reproductive drive is sex drive. It's just the result of the sex drive.
Yes, but
So
my sex drive is not a reproductive drive.
no,
No
no,
matter how hard I try.
Jesus Christ. You're trying to get me to make jokes, aren't you? All right, no. Seriously. All right, seriously. It is a reproductive drive. It's just an invalid target, so to speak. I'm not saying, oh, you're saying my sex drive is invalid? No, that's not what I'm fucking saying. What I'm saying is it's there, but we do not evolve on the basis of, oh, we're going to have a result in offspring. Nature gave us this urge to do something which results in offspring. That is how we evolved. That's the only way to do it, too.
But there are immense differences. For example, there are people who are completely asexual, right?
Right?
Like they don't have any desire to have sex or reproduce, right?
Yeah. It's
So,
entirely.
so there's room for that variation, right? Even though there's trends and tendencies, we
Well,
can have
then.
variations. And like to use Gad Saad's quote, as much as I hate him, the human tapestry can be very different and very complex.
You say you hate him, you say, well, I hate him, but he made one good point. That's how you go about that. But I'm saying is when it comes to asexuality, that is the absence of a perception of potential mates. So that is like a nothing, as opposed to a false something. So
Well,
when it comes
there
to
could be asexuals who are romantic.
sure, yeah,
They just don't want to have sex. They could be with
right.
someone. They can have a mate, but they might not be sexually attracted. They're just romantically attracted.
They might be friends, just best friends.
Or romantically attracted.
What is romantic?
I'll know when I see it.
But there you go. It's
I'm
really
sexually attracted to a lot of people I'm not romantically attracted to.
Right. Yes.
So that is different.
Yes, but it is different. But it is also intertwined. It's
Somewhat, yeah. Somewhat, yeah.
It's about interaction. Sexual interaction has multiple components to it. It's not only the sexual component; it's also the peer bonding component. Of course, you have family, which you are closer to than you are with normal friends. You're closer to your family than your friends.
Sometimes. I'm closer to
I'm
closer to my best friends than I am to my family.
Well, yeah, frankly, I agree. But nevertheless, it's an example of hierarchy. Maybe you have a best friend that's like a family or something like that. There's different aspects to different social involvement. Sexual has components. As a sexual component, it has a bonding component, and these are different parts of the brain that interact. So you have sexual and after-sexual because it evolved before our social instincts. So we had maternal instincts, then those maternal instincts mutated and became social instincts, and those social instincts became more complex. But before maternal, we still had a mating instinct. That mating instinct was not like, well, I hope this lizard over there is level in the head. She can raise my children. No, that's not the fun. People sense like, no, pop-up message. That's like the way that it evolves is you get the simplest version of things, and they build up and then more complex versions. But the mating instinct was parallel to the maternal instinct, because the maternal instinct is a social instinct which was evolved by early, I think, late reptiles that were before us, and that spun off into caring not for your kids but also close family members, and the close family members became
Do you think that 20
friends.
do you think that 20 or 30 years of socialization could alter some of those instincts?
No, No, I do
No.
not think so, because those social instincts lie right at the threshold of our higher brain functions and our lower brain functions.
So why are all mothers not the same?
All mothers are not the same because those parts of our brain still mutate because it is part of our lower cerebral functions. Our brains are
Wait.
the most flexible in
So
genetics.
I'm sorry. Wait. All mothers aren't the same because those parts of the brain don't mutate.
The ones that are social, actually no. Before humans, the maternal instinct had. Have you ever seen a rat eat her baby?
No.
They do. Sometimes when they're stressed, they don't have enough resources, they will eat their offspring because they can't take care of them. A lot of species do this. In fact, it's
Yeah.
only
Good.
weird when it
Good
comes to
for
humans.
them. Good for them.
Huh?
I've met some tasty babies in my life.
But that's my point, is humans are the only ones in which that is weird.
Not the only
So,
ones, right?
huh?
Not the only ones, right?
No, I think it's the only ones in which it's weird. Even dolphins kill their own offspring if they're stressed.
I mean, humans kill their own offspring too.
Well, sure, yeah, they do. But that's what I'm saying, is we're the only ones that look at it and say, "Oh, that's just abnormal." No, dolphins do it when they're stressed. Hell, apes do it. Lots of mammals eat their offspring. It's just there's this threshold at which you're either a good mother or you're going to eat your fucking babies. And of course, in humans, you're going to take care of your kids. You're going to drown them in the fucking bathtub. That is sort of our evolution. Now we don't do it as often, granted. And no, not all mothers are the same. They have different behaviors and thresholds and differences in how they treat their offspring. Yes, but with a normal goal of if either protect them or kill them, because fuck them,
All right.
whatever.
Sorry to bring it back a little bit. So, what does this have to do with trans people?
Well, I'm trying to give you like kind of a broad picture of the neurology and how we evolved and how the things develop in our brain as we get older. And so you understand that gender identity is not something that we can really define correctly. It is sort of decided upon with society, and it is so ambiguous that in order to diagnose it in a child who has not interacted with society effectively, which is part of our development as far as social creatures, we socially develop as our brain develops, and thus our identity forms. Our identity is not formed as young children, and therefore
Wait,
we
it
cannot say
is.
for sure that they are.
It's not cemented as young children, but it's never. Our identity is never cemented. Ever. It
There
isn't.
are that is half true. There are some things that we can change. There are some things we don't change, and there are things we can't change.
I'm saying in terms of our like cognitive identity, that's never like cemented. We can change at any point.
Right, but then you'd have to understand what the difference between a cognitive identity and a gender identity, and you can't define a gender identity. Again, I'm not
I
disagreeing
can't.
with
I was like,
you.
I can't, but I'm also not a medical professional.
Not no medical professional on the planet can properly identify gender with a definition. You can have masculine and feminine traits, but then in order to have masculine and feminine traits, you have the social component of being interactive. That's social behavior is synergistic. What I do upon the world is what the world does upon me. What I do to someone else, they do to me, and that is social identity. How you change. Not if somebody says my dad just died. You don't say, "Oh, well, he was a fucking prick, anyways." You don't say that. Why? That would be a dick thing to do,
Well,
right?
yeah, but that's again different than gender identity.
Yes, but I'm trying to explain to you your way that you interact in the world and how it interacts with you. That is also an aspect of gender identity.
Yes, but that's kind of what I was arguing for. Like when I brought up that study that said that. So hold on, let me find it again. Um, are the brains of transgender people different? Like they kind of say that too. Like it's very 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 complex. It has something to do with
But
the
it's also very
brain.
simple.
No, it's
There's
not.
according to that study, if I
It's the
recall it,
furthest thing from simple.
the greatest difference, the greatest similarity between transgender brains is the white matter, or the tracks, the neural associations. That's like the biggest thing, and that is also intrinsic to hyper emotional behavior because white matter is responsible for sensory, is responsible for interpreting the environment, or at least connecting our senses to memory.
Yeah, and I actually took notes on this. The white matter microstructure property known as mean diffusivity of trans men and women falls somewhere between cis men and women.
Hmm.
So the white matter of trans men and trans women falls somewhere between cis men and cis women.
Um, sure, that is so the case, then they are neither, as far as that one structure in the brain.
Yeah,
But there are many.
there are many structures in the brain.
Right.
Some of them result in this, like it's somewhere in
Yeah.
between.
Yeah.
Some of them, like what I said earlier, like BCTS or BSTC is what I meant to say, or INAH3. I don't know what either of those actually are, but are more similar, like to their cisgender, like who they are, who they identify
Sure.
as.
But those are only a couple of components.
Yeah,
There's a lot of
there are
components.
many components, but
Yes.
the ones that are most important, like sexual identity, seem.
No. That's the problem with it. You can't have a sexual identity unless you have a definition and diagnostic criteria. And a sexual identity, gender identity, are they the same things?
Hold on,
So you know,
I'm fairly sure that there are.
similarities to it, and there are things you can tie together, but they are not intertwined absolutely. And we know this because we can't define gender identity correctly because it is a amalgamous social construct.
Um,
That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's not even. I'm not even. I don't want to say this. I'm not even disagreeing with, say, your side of the argument. I'm not even saying that, oh, no, it's absolutely not true. What I'm saying is, we don't fucking know for sure. And I just don't want to involve kids until we know. That's my bottom line.
but how do we know if we're not allowed to, like?
To test it by, I get what you're saying. That's why I said the libertarian argument when it comes to parents. I am loosely for parents under certain conditions choosing transition for their kids, or say not choosing transition, I should say, okaying transition. Yeah, yeah, I am semi okay with it. I think that is a fair way to go about it because parents are always the ones who raise their kids, to do what they do. That's a parent thing. And while I immediately don't have like I don't like the idea, I'm still okay with that compromise because it just seems like the right thing to do. So you can still get some data out of that.
I want lots of data in all directions.
Sure, but you have to find a way to do it fairly without imposing it on people. Now, vaccines is a case in which you have children interacting with other children and they get sick. Fuck knows what's going to happen. Someone's going to get sick. All right. But this is a case where it's just a child. But, you can't really impose through the parents because we don't know exactly what's going on. But yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm coughing my head off.
Mhm.
One more. I'm almost there. All right, so we've been at this for. We've actually been at this for over 3 hours, but I'm an idiot.
Have we? Yes.
Yeah, I'm an idiot.
I didn't even notice.
And only streamed after 30 minutes, so I'm actually super mad at myself.
Yeah. Well, it has been actually quite a fascinating conversation. I hope I didn't feel hostile to you.
No, you didn't. I will say you
courteous.
were not hostile, so I will say that.
There you go. See, we can dispense the idea that I hate transgenders because that's not a thing for me.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you don't hate transgender.
No, I'm
people.
talking to them, and specifically one, with a couple of faces out there.
So it's the thing to do. Can I get a trans rights from you?
What?
Can I
Trans rights?
Can I get a trans rights from you?
What does that mean? Say trans-
It means support the rights of trans
Oh
people.
yeah. I support trans rights. Again, to the limits of young children, then it gets murky.
Okay, well, so I think we come to an agreement here. Like, there's a lot of research going one way, and you kind of agree with transitioning for adults, but for children, you're still iffy, right?
Absolutely, that is a good way to put it.
Cool, awesome. I'm happy with the internet there, and I've had to pee for the past hour and a half. But thank you so much for coming on. So this has been Dank Science. I want to put his.
It,
Yeah. So, do you have anything you want to plug before we end here?
following me on Twitter and rant at me if you want to ask questions. I'm also a computer scientist, so at TARDIS PDA, TARDIS like Doctor Who, no periods.
Yeah. At TARDISPDA.
Very good. It's been a pleasure, Mr. Jangles. It was actually
All right.
pretty
It
cool.
was a fun conversation, man. All right. I
Have a
will
good night.
see you later.